Somewhere on your phone right now, there is probably a photo of you as a baby, maybe wrapped in a blanket, maybe crying, maybe staring blankly at a camera you had no idea existed. You know that baby was you, but you don't remember a single second of being him or her. Not one. And the real reason why is far stranger than simply you were too young. You weren't too young to think. You weren't too young to feel. Your brain, even in the womb, was already doing something. So why is there nothing there when you try to reach back? Start with what your brain was actually doing before you were born. By the third trimester, a fetus can hear muffled sounds. It can respond to its mother's voice. It can even show changes in heart rate when a familiar piece of music plays. There is activity in there. There is a kind of primitive learning happening. And yet, none of it survives into the memories you carry today. This gap even has a name. Psychologists call it infantile amnesia, a term first used by Sigmund Freud over a century ago, though his explanation for it turned out to be almost entirely wrong. Freud thought childhood memories were repressed, buried on purpose because they were too disturbing to keep. Modern neuroscience tells a very different story, and it's one that has nothing to do with repression at all. Here's the actual problem. Memory isn't one single thing. It's a system, built from several different parts of the brain working together, and that system is still under construction for the first few years of your life. The hippocampus is the structure most responsible for forming the kind of memory you're using right now, the kind that lets you recall specific events from your own life. In infants and toddlers, the hippocampus is still growing new neurons at an extraordinary rate. That sounds like it should help memory, not hurt it. But researcher Paul Frankland at the University of Toronto ran a series of studies on mice that revealed something almost paradoxical. In a 2014 study published in Science, Frankland's team found that high rates of neurogenesis, the birth of new neurons, actually seemed to interfere with the stability of existing memories. Young mice with rapidly growing hippocampi forgot things faster than adult mice. When the researchers artificially slowed down neuron growth in infant mice, the animals' memories lasted noticeably longer. In other words, the very process that builds your brain in early life may be the same process erasing what you're trying to store in it. Doesn't that feel almost cruel? The brain that's working hardest to develop is the same brain wiping its own hard drive as it goes. But neuron growth isn't the whole story. There's a second piece, and it has to do with language. Psychologist Patricia Bauer at Emory University has spent decades studying how memory develops in very young children. Her research shows that toddlers as young as 2 can form and even briefly recall specific memories. The problem isn't that the memories don't exist. The problem is how fragile and how narrative they are. Autobiographical memory, the kind where you can tell a story about something that happened to you, requires a sense of self across time. It requires understanding that the you from yesterday is the same you today and will be the same you tomorrow. That sense doesn't fully click into place until somewhere around age 3 or 4. Before that, a memory might form for a moment, but there's no stable narrator to file it under. Language plays a bigger role here than most people expect. Researcher Carol Peterson at Memorial University of Newfoundland has spent years studying how children talk about their earliest memories. Her work found something remarkable. Children who had richer conversations with their parents about daily events, conversations full of detail and follow-up questions, tended to retain earlier and more vivid memories years later. The memories weren't just happening to them, they were being built collaboratively through language. So here's the picture starting to form. Your earliest years weren't a blank void. They were a construction site. Neurons multiplying too fast for stability, a sense of self still assembling itself piece by piece. A narrative structure, borrowed partly from the adults around you, not yet strong enough to hold a story together. And once that structure was finally ready, something interesting happened. It didn't reach backward to rescue what came before. It simply started fresh, running forward from that point on. This is why most adults' earliest memory sits somewhere between ages 3 and 4, occasionally a little earlier, almost never before 2. It's not a wall. It's more like a light slowly being switched on, dim at first, growing steady only after months or years of flickering. Now think about what this means for the version of you that existed before that light turned on. That baby in the photo on your phone had real experiences, real fear, real comfort, real joy at a familiar face leaning over the crib. None of it vanished because it didn't matter. It vanished because the machinery required to keep it, the hippocampus at a slower burn, the sturdy sense of self, the scaffolding of language, simply hadn't finished being built yet. There's a strange mirror to this happening in your life right now, and you may not have noticed it. You forget most of your dreams within minutes of waking. Not because they didn't happen, but because the transition out of sleep disrupts the same consolidation process that memory depends on. Your earliest years work the same way, just stretched across months instead of minutes, experience without retention, presence without a permanent record. It also explains something else you've probably felt without being able to name it. That eerie second-hand feeling you get looking at your own baby photos. You recognize the face. You know the facts. Someone told you the story of that day at the beach, or that first birthday cake smashed across a high chair tray. But there's no genuine recall attached to it, only inherited narrative passed down from people who were actually present when you weren't, not in any way your current brain can access. So the next time you scroll past that baby photo, notice what's actually happening. You're not remembering. You're trusting your parents' account, trusting the photograph, trusting a story that was handed to you because your own brain wasn't yet capable of writing it down permanently. That baby was you, completely, entirely, in every biological sense that matters. But the self telling this story right now didn't exist yet. Not because you were absent, but because the part of you built to remember hadn't finished arriving. You couldn't remember being a baby, not because nothing happened, but because the one thing that had to happen first, the birth of a stable, story-keeping self, was still weeks and months and years away from finishing. You didn't lose those memories. You simply weren't there yet to keep them.